They humiliated the new kid, not knowing he was an elite fighter. The fluorescent lights of Westridge High School buzzed overhead as Ethan Chen kept his eyes fixed on the cracked linoleum floor. At 15, he was smaller than most boys his age, with a soft, rounded face that still carried traces of childhood. His oversized hoodie, a deliberate choice to hide his slightly chubby frame, hung from his shoulders like a protective shell. 3 weeks at this new school, and he'd already mapped out every possible route to avoid attention. Transferring mid-semester hadn't been his choice. His father's job relocation had uprooted their entire life, forcing Ethan to leave behind the few friends he'd had back in San Francisco. Here in Lakeside, he was just another face, or rather, he wished he was. Unfortunately, his slightly accented English, quiet demeanor, and Asian features had made him stand out in all the wrong ways at this predominantly white suburban school. What none of his classmates knew was that back in San Francisco, Ethan had trained in mixed martial arts since he was 7 years old. His grandfather, a former champion fighter in China, had insisted that his grandson learn to defend himself. For 8 years, Ethan had diligently practiced, becoming proficient in several fighting disciplines. His instructor had even suggested he compete professionally someday. But Ethan's parents had strict rules. Fighting is only for self-defense, his father had repeated countless times. Never to intimidate, never to show off. Ethan had taken those words to heart. So when the bullying started at Westridge, his instinct wasn't to fight back, it was to endure. "Hey, China boy," the voice echoed down the hallway, making Ethan's shoulders tense. Bryce Kellerman, a junior with broad shoulders and a varsity football jacket, was approaching with his 2 sidekicks, Derek and Tyler. Ethan quickened his pace, but the trio caught up easily, surrounding him against the lockers. "I asked you a question yesterday about my math homework and you just walked away," Bryce said, his mouth twisted in mock offense. "That's pretty rude, don't you think, guys?" Derek snickered. "Maybe he doesn't speak English." "I speak English fine," Ethan said quietly, eyes still downcast. "I was late for class." "He speaks," Tyler exclaimed, feigning shock, "but I don't think he understands how things work around here." He poked Ethan's chest hard enough to push him back against the lockers. "When Bryce asks for help, you help. Period." Ethan's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but he relaxed them immediately. "Don't react. Don't give them what they want." "I need to get to class," he said. Bryce leaned in closer. "You think you're too good to help me out? Is that it?" The warning bell rang, and students hurried through the halls. No one stopped to interfere. "I can. To help you with math during study hall," Ethan offered, hoping to defuse the situation. Bryce's face darkened. "I don't need your charity." He glanced at his friends and a silent communication passed between them. "But you know what? I'm feeling generous today. I'll let you go for now." As Ethan moved to step around them, he felt a hand briefly press against his back. He didn't think much of it until he entered his history class and heard snickering behind him. "Mr. Chen," his history teacher, Mrs. Lawson, said with a frown, "please remove whatever is on your back and take your seat." Heat rushed to Ethan's face as he reached behind him and pulled off a piece of paper taped to his hoodie. In bold black marker, someone had written, "Kick me," with a crude drawing of a face with slanted eyes. The laughter in the classroom grew louder. Ethan crumpled the paper and hurried to his seat, humiliation burning through him. He slumped low, wishing he could disappear completely. Throughout the morning, the incident followed him like a shadow. In the hallways between classes, he caught whispers and pointing fingers. By lunchtime, his stomach was too knotted to eat. He found a quiet corner in the library instead, missing lunch entirely. The afternoon brought physical education, Ethan's least favorite class. Not because he wasn't athletic, but because the locker room was Bryce's territory, and the gym teacher, Coach Phillips, seemed to conveniently disappear whenever trouble started. Ethan changed quickly, keeping to himself, but as he headed toward the gym, a foot shot out, tripping him. He managed to catch himself before falling completely, his reflexes kicking in automatically. "Whoa, look at Bruce Lee over here," Derek laughed. "Got some moves, huh?" Ethan said, nothing, continuing toward the gym doors. "Hey," Tyler called out, "aren't you forgetting something?" He was holding up Ethan's water bottle. Reluctantly, Ethan turned back. "Can I have my water bottle, please?" "Sure thing, buddy." Tyler tossed it to him, but as Ethan caught it, he realized the cap was loose. Water soaked the front of his gym shirt. More laughter erupted from the small gathering of boys. Ethan stood there, dripping and humiliated, but still silent. Coach Phillips finally appeared, blowing his whistle for class to begin. "Chen, why are you wet? Never mind, just get in." "Line," the class began with a 2-lap warm-up around the gym. As Ethan jogged, trying to ignore his damp shirt clinging to his skin, he felt a sharp kick to the back of his leg. He stumbled but kept his balance. "Oh, sorry," said a boy named Jason, whom Ethan barely knew. "Didn't see you there." He held up a crumpled paper. "But someone put this on your back. Guess I was just following instructions." He and his friends burst into laughter. Ethan reached behind him and found another "Kick Me" sign taped to his back. His cheeks burned as he ripped it off. Throughout the period, it happened 2 more times. Different students, different moments, but the same humiliating result. Each time, Ethan removed the sign, only to find another one mysteriously attached minutes later. Bryce and his friends were coordinating the whole thing, taking turns to stick the notes on his back whenever Coach Phillips wasn't looking. By the time class ended, Ethan's legs were sore from the kicks, and his pride was in shreds. As he changed back into his regular clothes, he heard Bryce's voice from around the corner of the lockers. "Tomorrow we should try something new. I'm thinking maybe a punch me sign. What do you guys think?" The responding laughter made Ethan's stomach churn. That night, Ethan didn't mention anything to his parents. His mother was busy unpacking boxes that had been sitting in the garage for weeks, and his father was working late again. Instead, he retreated to his room, pulled out his laptop, and video called his best friend from San Francisco, Min. "Dude, you look terrible," Min said as soon as he saw Ethan's face. "What's going on?" For a moment, Ethan considered lying, but then the words tumbled out. He told Min everything, about Bryce and his friends, about the kick me signs, about standing in gym class with a soaked shirt while everyone laughed. "Why aren't you doing anything about it?" Min asked, his expression incredulous. "You could destroy those guys." Ethan shook his head. "You know what my dad says." "Yeah, but this is exactly what your training is for, self-defense." "Hey, it's not self-defense if I'm not in actual danger," Ethan argued. "They're just being jerks." Min rolled his eyes. "Fine, but promise me you won't let it get too far. There's a difference between being peaceful and being a doormat." After they hung up, Ethan sat on his bed, Min's words echoing in his mind. Was he being a doormat? He thought about his grandfather, about the discipline and strength the old man had instilled in him. Would he be disappointed to see Ethan now? He got up and moved to the center of his room, pushing aside a box of unpacked belongings. Closing his eyes, Ethan began to move through the forms his grandfather had taught him, his body remembering what his mind wanted to forget. The familiar movements brought a sense of calm, of centering. For a brief moment, he wasn't the new kid, the target, the victim. He was just Ethan, connected to something greater than high school politics. Tomorrow will be different, he told himself, not because he would fight back, he still didn't believe that was the answer, but because he would find another way to handle the situation. Maybe he could talk to a teacher or a counselor, but the next day proved even worse. It started in the morning when he found his locker had been vandalized with a crude drawing and slurs. The school janitor cleaned it off, but not before several students had seen it and taken pictures. In English class, someone had filled his desk with crumpled "kick me" signs. The teacher, Mr. Peterson, had made a half-hearted attempt to discover who was responsible, but no one came forward, and he quickly moved on with the lesson. By lunchtime, Ethan was so anxious he couldn't eat again. He found a quiet table in the far corner of the cafeteria, hoping to be left alone. For a few minutes, it seemed like he would be. Then a shadow fell across his table. "This seat taken?" asked a girl with dark curly hair and glasses. Without waiting for an answer, she sat down opposite him. "I'm Sophie. You're in my math class." Ethan nodded cautiously. "Ethan, I know." She unwrapped her sandwich. "I saw what happened yesterday, and this morning. It's not right." Ethan stared at his untouched lunch. "It's fine. It's really not," Sophie insisted. "Bryce and his minions do this every year to someone new. Last year it was a freshman named Alex. He ended up transferring out." A cold feeling settled in Ethan's stomach. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you don't deserve it." She took a bite of her sandwich, chewed thoughtfully, then added, "And because I think you might be different." "Different how?" Sophie shrugged. "I don't know yet. Just a feeling." Their conversation was interrupted when a milk carton flew across. At the table, landing with a splat next to Ethan's tray, chocolate milk sprayed across his shirt and the table. "Oops," Bryce called from a few tables away. "My bad, kick me, kid." The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Even students who hadn't been involved in the bullying joined in. It had become a school-wide joke. Sophie handed Ethan some napkins. "You should report them," she said quietly. "To who?" Ethan asked, dabbing at his shirt. "No one cares." "I do," she said firmly. For some reason, those two simple words hit Ethan harder than any of the humiliation had. Someone cared. Someone saw what was happening and thought it was wrong. That afternoon, as he headed to his last class of the day, Ethan spotted Bryce and his friends lounging by the water fountain. He considered taking a different route, but there wasn't time before the bell. He would have to walk past them. Head down, he quickened his pace. But it wasn't enough. "Well, if it isn't our favorite punching bag," Bryce said loudly, pushing off from the wall. "Got a minute, Chen?" Ethan kept walking. A hand grabbed his backpack, yanking him backward. "I asked you a question." Something inside Ethan shifted. Not anger exactly, but a quiet resolve. He turned to face Bryce. "I'm going to be late for class." Oh, now he's worried about class. Derek mocked. "What a nerd." Bryce stepped closer, using his height to tower over Ethan. "I don't like your attitude, China boy. I think you need to learn some respect." Ethan held his gaze for the first time. "Please let go of my backpack." Surprise flickered across Bryce's face, quickly replaced by anger. Or what? The hallway had grown quiet, other students sensing the shift in energy. A small crowd began to form. "Or nothing," Ethan said evenly. "I'm just asking you to let go." Bryce's grip tightened. "Make me." In that moment, something in Ethan's demeanor changed. It was subtle, a slight straightening of his back, a firmness in his stance. But it was enough for Bryce to notice. A flash of uncertainty crossed the bully's face. Then Tyler stepped forward, slapping another "kick me" sign on Ethan's back. There, now maybe he'll get the message beaten into him. Before Ethan could react, someone from the gathering crowd darted forward and kicked him hard in the back of his leg. A boy named Mason, one of Bryce's football teammates, just following instructions. Mason laughed, high-fiving Tyler. The kick caught Ethan off balance, and he stumbled forward. As he regained his footing, another kick came from behind, harder. This time, then another. The crowd was getting into it now, the kick-me game escalating into something more dangerous. Ethan felt a powerful kick to his lower back that sent him to his knees. "Hey!" He heard Sophie's voice from somewhere in the crowd. "Stop it!" But the frenzy had taken on a life of its own. Bryce stood back, watching with a satisfied smirk as his impromptu mob did his dirty work for him. As Ethan tried to stand, someone shoved him from behind, sending him sprawling onto the floor. His backpack slid across the hallway, spilling books and papers. Laughter and jeers filled the air. This isn't right, Ethan thought, feeling a hot surge of anger. Not at the bullies, he had expected this from them, but at himself for letting it go this far. Min's voice echoed in his head. There's a difference between being peaceful and being a doormat. His grandfather had also taught him something. Else something he'd forgotten until this moment. True strength isn't in avoiding conflict. It's in knowing when conflict is necessary. As another kick came toward him, Ethan's body reacted before his mind could stop it. He rolled to the side, the kick missing him entirely. In one fluid motion, he was on his feet, standing in a neutral stance that most observers wouldn't recognize as a fighting position. "Whoa," someone in the crowd murmured. "Did you see that?" Bryce stepped forward, no longer content to watch from the sidelines. "Lucky dodge," he sneered. "Let's see you try that again." He swung a fist aimed directly at Ethan's face. What happened next would later be described in a dozen different ways by those who witnessed it. To some, it looked like Bryce simply tripped over his own feet. To others, it appeared that Ethan had barely touched him before the larger boy was suddenly airborne, then flat on his back on the hard floor. The truth was somewhere in between. Ethan had sidestepped the punch with ease, caught Bryce's extended arm, and used the bully's own momentum to throw him off balance. It was a basic move, one of the first his grandfather had taught him. Stunned silence fell over the hallway. Bryce scrambled to his feet, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "You're dead, Chen!" He charged forward like a bull. This time there was no mistaking what happened. Ethan moved with precision and control, blocking Bryce's wild swings and delivering a single, perfectly placed palm strike to the chest that sent the larger boy staggering backward. "What the hell?" Derek exclaimed, looking at his friend in disbelief. Then at Ethan. "You're gonna pay for that." He and Tyler rushed forward together. Ethan didn't want to fight, but he was done being a victim. He met them with a series of defensive moves that left both boys confused and off balance. He didn't throw a single punch, he didn't need to. He simply redirected their aggression, making them look foolish in the process. The crowd had grown larger now, students pushing and shoving to get a better view. Phones were out, recording everything. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" The chant began somewhere in the back and quickly spread. Bryce, recovered from the initial shock, was furious. "Get him!" he shouted to anyone who would listen. Mason and two other football players stepped forward, surrounding Ethan. For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of concern. One opponent was manageable. 4 or 5 was a different story. even with his training. Just as they moved to attack, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "What is going on here?" Principal Vaughn pushed through the crowd, his face thunderous. Behind him was Sophie, who had apparently gone for help. The hallway fell silent immediately. "My office now," the principal said, pointing at Bryce, his friends, and Ethan. "The rest of you get to class before I start handing out detentions." The crowd dispersed quickly, though not without excited whispers and backward glances. Ethan caught Sophie's eye as he followed the principal. She gave him a small, reassuring nod. In the principal's office, the story unfolded in fragments. Bryce and his friends claimed Ethan had attacked them unprovoked. Ethan said little, knowing it would be his word against theirs. Then Sophie appeared at the door. "I have something you should see, Principal Vaughn." She held up her phone, showing a video of the entire incident, from the first kick to Ethan's defensive maneuvers. More importantly, it showed clearly that Ethan had never thrown a punch, had only defended himself. "I see," Principal Vaughn said. Grimly, after watching, he looked at Bryce and his friends. "You boys wait outside. I need to speak with Mr. Chen alone." When they were alone, the principal studied Ethan with new interest. "That was impressive control, Mr. Chen. Where did you learn to fight like that?" "My grandfather taught me," Ethan said quietly, "and then I trained at a dojo in San Francisco. But I wasn't fighting, sir. I was just defending myself." Principal Vaughn nodded slowly. "I can see that. But why didn't you report the bullying sooner?" Ethan looked down. "I didn't think anyone would believe me or care." The principal sighed heavily. "That's a failure on our part then. But I want you to know that we do care. And this kind of behavior," he gestured to the video, "is not tolerated at Westridge." By the end of the day, Bryce and his friends had received 2 weeks of suspension and mandatory counseling sessions. The Kick Me incident was addressed in a special assembly the following day, with Principal Vaughn making it clear that bullying in any form would result in serious consequences. For Ethan, the change was immediate and disorienting. Students who had ignored him or participated in his humiliation now looked at him with a mixture of awe and respect. Videos of the hallway confrontation had circulated widely, earning him a new nickname, the Quiet Dragon. "I told you, you were different," Sophie said when they met for lunch the next day. This time, several other students joined their table, eager to meet the boy who had stood up to Bryce Kellerman. "I'm really not," Ethan insisted. "I just got tired of being kicked." A week later, Bryce returned to school, subdued and noticeably less aggressive. He avoided Ethan at first, but on Friday afternoon he approached Ethan's locker alone. Ethan tensed, ready to defend himself if necessary. "Relax," Bryce said, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to start anything." Ethan waited, saying nothing. "Look," Bryce continued, clearly uncomfortable. What we all did, it wasn't cool, and I'm sorry." The apology was awkward and probably mandated by the counselor, but it seemed sincere enough. Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay, that's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say?" Ethan asked. Bryce shrugged. "I don't know. That you forgive me? That you hate me? Something." Ethan considered this. "I don't hate you, but I don't forgive you yet either. That takes time." A fair answer. Bryce nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Where did you learn to fight like that anyway?" "My grandfather was a champion in China. He taught me since I was little." "That's actually pretty cool." Bryce shifted his weight awkwardly. "Well, see you around, I guess." As Bryce walked away, Ethan felt a strange sense of closure. Not everything was resolved, it couldn't be that simple, but something had shifted. That afternoon, as he left school, he spotted a group of seniors hassling a freshman by the bike racks. The younger boy looked terrified, clutching his backpack to his chest as the older boys laughed and shoved him. Without thinking, Ethan changed direction, heading straight for the group. As he approached, one of the seniors spotted him. "Hey, isn't that the Kung Fu kid?" he muttered to his friends. They turned to look at Ethan, their expressions changing from amusement to wariness. "Everything okay here?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. The seniors exchanged glances. "Just messing around," one of them said defensively. "No big deal." "Looks like more than messing around to me," Ethan replied. He looked at the freshman. "You all right?" The boy nodded quickly, clearly eager to escape the situation. "Great. Then he's free to go, right?" Ethan maintained eye contact with the leader of the group, who eventually shrugged and stepped aside. "Whatever, man, we're done here anyway." As the freshman hurried away, Ethan felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Sophie, a knowing smile on her face. "Saving the world one freshman at a time," she teased. Ethan felt his cheeks warm. "Just doing what anyone should do." "But they don't," she pointed out. "That's what makes you different." As they walked home together, Ethan realized something important. His grandfather had taught him to fight, but he'd also taught him when to fight. Not for himself, but for what was right. The kick me signs had been humiliating, but they'd also forced him to remember who he really was, not a victim, not a bully, just someone who refused to stand by when others were suffering, including himself. That night he called his grandfather for the first time since moving to Lakeside. The old man answered on the third ring, his weathered face filling Ethan's. "Laptop screen, grandson," he said, his accent thick but his smile wide. "It has been too long." "I know, Yeye, I'm sorry." Ethan hesitated, then added, "I used what you taught me today." His grandfather's bushy eyebrows rose. "Did you now? Tell me everything." So Ethan did, from the kick me signs to the hallway confrontation to helping the freshmen that afternoon. When he finished, his grandfather was silent for a long moment. "You did well," he said finally. "Not because you defended yourself, though that was necessary, but because you remembered the most important lesson." "What's that, Yeye?" The old man's eyes crinkled at the corners. "That true strength is not shown in victory over others, but in standing up for what is right, especially when it is difficult." Ethan nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I think I'm going to be okay here, Yeye." "I know you will," his grandfather replied. "And next time, don't wait so long to call your old grandfather. I miss your face." "I won't," Ethan promised, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. The next Monday, when Ethan walked into school, there was no dread, no hunched shoulders, no eyes fixed on the floor. He stood tall, greeted those he passed, and wore his identity proudly. The kick-me signs were gone, replaced by a newfound respect, not because he could fight, but because he had shown courage, restraint, and integrity when it mattered most. And that, as his grandfather would say, was the true mark of a warrior.